أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وآله الطيبين الطاهرين. This is our 19th episode in Introduction to Rijal Studies. In the previous episodes we discussed indicators of reliability, and this will be our final episode for indicators of reliability, and it will be our last episode for this course, inshallah, in Introduction to Rijal Studies. Today we will discuss two indicators of reliability, and over the last several episodes we've discussed, I believe, six. We've discussed four, and today we will discuss two. So 6 indicators of reliability. There might be more, but these are the most important ones. So this 5th indicator of reliability, or the first in today's episode, is called كثرة الرواية عن المعصوم. If a transmitter has many narrations from the infallibles, he's a well-known transmitter, meaning he has lots of transmissions, he has lots of narrations. He's narrated over 200, 300, 400 narrations from the Imam. Is this an indicator that he's reliable and trustworthy or not? There are some that believe if you have lots of narrations from the Imam and no one has said anything bad about you, then you must be reliable, you must be trustworthy. So for example, Al-Wahid al-Bahbahani, he believes in this. He accepts this indicator of reliability, and he says, indeed, كونه كثير الرواية وهو موجب للعمل بروايته مع عدم الطعن. If he has a lot of narrations and no one has said anything negative about him, then he's accepted, he's reliable, according to Al-Shahid al-Awwal, and also according to, he says, Al-Wahid al-Bahbani, according to my grandfather, meaning Al-Shaykh Muhammad Taqi al-Majlisi. And he says, according to my uncle, meaning Al-Shaykh Muhammad Baqir al-Majlisi, the author of Al-Bihar, and also according to Al-Allam al-Hilli, that if someone has a lot of narrations and no one has said anything negative about him, then that person has to be reliable. Now, this indicator is very important. Why? Because there are several individuals, several transmitters and narrators whom the Rijalis have not told us that they are reliable explicitly. Najashi, Sheikh Tusi, others, they have not told us that this individual is explicitly reliable, thiqa. However, he has lots of narrations. There are some, their narrations are over 500, 600. There are some, they have over 1,000 narrations in the 4 books of Hadith. Can these individuals be considered reliable or not? There are some who the only indicator of reliability is that they have a lot of narrations. For example, Ibrahim ibn Hashim. Ibrahim ibn Hashim is the father of Ali ibn Ibrahim, and we've talked about him before. When we talked about Tafsir Ali ibn Ibrahim al-Qummi, we talked about his father Ibrahim ibn Hashim. Ibrahim ibn Hashim lived in Kufa, and then he moved to Qom, and he spread the narrations of Kufa and Qom. And if you remember, we said that the scholars of Qom were very strict when it came to narrations, when it came to Rijal, who they would accept, who they wouldn't accept. They were very, very strict. They were very meticulous and detailed. Yet Ibrahim ibn Hashim was welcome to spread the narrations of Kufa and Qom. Although there was a difference, the style of the narrations of Kufa were different from the style of the narrations of Qom. Nevertheless, Ibrahim ibn Hashim was welcomed to Qom to spread the narrations of Kufa. Ibrahim ibn Hashim does not have an explicit authentication. no one has explicitly mentioned that he is thiqah. However, Ibrahim ibn Hashim has thousands of narrations. Thousands of narrations. Maybe a third of the narrations of Al-Kafi are by Ibrahim ibn Hashim. That's a big number. So there are some that said Ibrahim ibn Hashim is reliable, he's thiqah, based on this indicator of reliability, كثرة الرواية عن المعصوم, because he has so many narrations. And indeed, Al-Alam al-Hilli, he says regarding Ibrahim ibn Hashim, لم أقف لأحد من أصحابنا على قول في القدح فيه ولا على تعديله بالتنصيص. He says, I haven't seen anyone say something negative about him, nor have I seen anyone say that he's explicitly reliable. والروايات عنه كثيرة, and he has lots of narrations. والأرجح قبول قوله. Most likely we can accept his narrations. طيب. So this is an indicator of reliability that some scholars have accepted, that if you have a lot of narrations from the Ma'sumin and they're recorded, they're narrated in the 4 books of Hadith, and no one has said anything bad about you, and that means you are reliable. Sayyid al-Khoi, he rejects this indicator of reliability. As you've seen, Sayyid al-Khoi is very strict, and he doesn't accept these indicators of reliability very quickly. No, he's very detailed. He says, just because a person has a lot of narrations, it doesn't mean that he's reliable. So let's see the background. Why would we consider those who considered the transmitters who have a lot of narrations to be reliable? Why? And those who rejected this indicator of reliability, why? We have to look at the 2 justifications and their proof and evidence to assess which opinion is correct. First of all, we have several narrations by the Ahlul Bayt that emphasize on knowing, recognizing those who narrate a lot from the Imams. There are some narrations that say he who narrates a lot from the Ahlul Bayt, that means he has a special status, special position with the Ahlul Bayt, because the Imams are entrusting him with their knowledge. They're entrusting him or her. Usually there were men, although there were female transmitters, but most of them were male. If a person narrates a lot from the Imams, that means that person has a special status and special position from the Ahlul Bayt. That means the Ahlul Bayt were entrusting him or her. So one narration on the authority of Imam Sadiq, he says, اعرفوا منازل الرجال منا على قدر روايتهم عنا. Know the position of men to us by the amount of narrations that they have transmitted from us. And another narration also on the authority of Imam Sadiq, اعرفوا منازل شيعتنا بقدر ما يحسنون من روايتهم. Know the position of our Shia according to how many narrations they perfect from us. فإنا لا نعد الفقيه منهم فقيها حتى يكون محدثا. The Imam says that we will not consider one of them a jurist as a jurist unless he's a muhaddith, unless he's a transmitter, unless he transmits a hadith from us. Then we'll consider him as a jurist, as a faqih. And a third narration, also on the authority of Imam Sadiq, he says, اعرفوا منازل الناس منا على قدر روايتهم عنا. Know the position of people from us by the amount of narrations that they transmit from us. So some scholars said that these narrations are all trying to tell us that the more a person has narrations and has transmissions, the more reliable he is. This shows that this person was trustworthy, he was reliable, he was trusted by the Imams. The Imams entrusted him or her with their knowledge, and so that person will pass on their knowledge to others. So that means he has to be reliable. He has to be trustworthy. So the mere fact that a person has lots of narrations from the Ahl Bayt, this is a good sign. This is a sign of reliability. The problem is, these narrations, they face a couple of problems. Some have been indicated by Sayyid al-Khoi and others by others. So for example, Sayyid al-Khoi says these three narrations are all weak when it comes to their isnad, chain of narrators. The first narration has Muhammad ibn Sinan, and Muhammad ibn Sinan is unreliable, so we knock off the first hadith. The second, there's no connected chain to the Imam, there's a disconnect, raf'. So when the chain is not connected to the Imam, there's a disconnection, that narration becomes weak. وَالثَّالِث لِأَجْلِ الْإِرْسَالِ. And the third, there's a missing link in the chain. We know there's someone in the chain of narrators, we just don't know who he is. That person could be unreliable. This is called irsal. When you know there's a person between you and the Imam, or the narrator and the Imam, but you don't know who that person is, this is called irsal. And that rawai al-mursala becomes valueless because you don't know who that person is. It could be someone who's a liar, it could be someone who's unreliable, and it could be someone who's reliable. So it's a 50-50 chance. You're taking a risk. You can't rely on that narration. So this is one. Two, this is one problem that deals with the sanad. The other problem deals with the content. The Imam is saying, know the position of men, of people, based on how many narrations they narrate from us. Sayyid al-Khoi says, so first of all, we have to prove that this person narrated a lot from the Imam, and then we can say this person is valuable, this person's honorable, this person's reliable. How do we know this? Just because so-and-so says, the Imam said this, the Imam said this, the Imam said this, this doesn't prove that he has a lot of narrations from the Imam. He could be lying. He could be lying. If someone trustworthy tells us that this person has a lot of narrations from the Imam, has a lot of transmissions from the Imam, and tells us those narrations, we could rely on him. But not when he is telling us. Not when that transmitter who's under question, he's telling us, Imam al-Sadiq said this, Imam al-Sadiq said that, Imam al-Kadhim said this, and he has over 100 narrations. So what do we say? We say, okay, well, as long as this person has a lot of narrations, then he must be valuable. Then he must be trustworthy. We don't know. We have to prove that he has a lot of narrations that have been transmitted on the authority of the Ahl Bayt. Then we consider him reliable. Sayyid al-Khoi says we can't prove that. Just by him stating narrations on the authority of Ahl Bayt doesn't mean he has a lot of narrations. It could mean he has a lot of lies. You see, it's a very, very detailed problem, and it's very smart and witty of Sayyid al-Khoi to pay attention to such a detail. So this is one problem. Another problem, which has been mentioned by other scholars of Rijal, for example, Sheikh Muslim al-Dawari was a contemporary scholar of Rijal and a student of Sayyid al-Khoi. He says, one of the narrations says, اعرفوا منازل الرجال اعرفوا منازل شيعتنا بقدر ما يحسنون من روايتهم عنه. Know the position of the Shia according to how many narrations they perfect from us. Perfection of hadith is different from transmission of hadith. Transmission of hadith is you come and say, Imam Sadiq said this, Imam Sadiq said that. But perfection of hadith is that you say the hadith just like you heard it, without adding, without subtracting, without pluses or minuses. You say it the way you heard it. And this is different. So these hadith have nothing to do with the amount, the quantity of the narrations of this transmitter. Rather, they're looking at the quality of the narrations of this transmitter. So there's a difference. Sheikh al-Dawari says these narrations are talking about the quality of the narrations, while other scholars assume they're talking about the quantity of the narrations, and there's a big difference. Now, this is a very long discussion, but in my humble opinion, that if a person does have a lot of quantity quantity-wise. A lot of narrations from the Imam. And this is a very, very important condition. Without it, the first condition is not enough. The second condition is a must. And no one has said anything negative about this transmitter or narrator. Then that person is deemed reliable and trustworthy. Why? Not because of these narrations. Not because of اعرفوا منازل الرجال اعرفوا منازل الشيعة. No. But because, let's say this person has 500 narrations in the 4 books of Hadith. And these 500 narrations are important. They're fiqhi, they're aqaidi, they're tafsir. They matter in the field of religion. If the scholars of Rijal, they believed that this person is unreliable, and yet they remained quiet, this would put a danger on Shia intellectual thought. Because if this person fabricates, that means he's fabricated 500 narrations, 600 narrations in our most important books, the 4 books of Hadith. They would not have remained silent. The fact that they remained silent while looking at these numerous narrations, 500, 600, maybe some of them had 1,000 narrations, they remained silent. That means that person, according to those early scholars of Rijal, he was what? Reliable, authentic, trustworthy. Look at Abu Hurairah. Abu Hurairah has lots of narrations, has thousands of narrations. But look at the attack on Abu Hurairah. Why? Because Abu Hurairah has so many narrations. You have those who want to defend religion and Islam and Islamic intellectual thought. They had to discredit Abu Hurairah because he was known as a liar, because he was known as unreliable, untrustworthy. Thus, you see books, articles on the unreliability of Abu Hurairah. Why? Because we cannot allow his narrations to penetrate our books while he's someone who's unreliable. You see? So if anyone who has the amount of narrations like Abu Hurairah and he's deemed unreliable, you would see a reaction, books, articles, papers on the unreliability of that individual. So كثرة الرواية عن المعصوم, having lots of narrations, and no one has said anything negative, this is an indicator of reliability. And hence, we could authenticate individuals who had a lot of narrations, like Sahl ibn Ziyad, Umar ibn Hanzala, Muhammad ibn Sinan, and Nawfali, Ali ibn Abi Hamza. Although some of these narrators, something negative has been said about them, but not personally. Not about their reliability, but about their school of thought, about their views, about being mughali, about being deviant, but not being credible. So, obviously this would require some in-depth discussions, but in general we do accept this indicator of reliability. The final indicator of reliability is قول الشيخ أسند عنه. Shaykh al-Tusi, in his Rijal, when he mentions the categories of the Rijal, the narrators, starting from the companions of Rasulullah to the companions of Imam Ali, Imam al-Hasan, Imam Hussein, all the way down to the 11th Imam. He mentions the companions of all the Imams and who narrated from these Imams. And some of them he wrote Usnida anhu. Usnida anhu. This Usnida anhu became a problem. What does he mean by Usnida anhu? Some said that Usnida anhu, when Shaykh al-Tusi writes for some of these men, some of these transmitters, Usnida anhu, it means that he is reliable. And this is a major indicator. If this is true, this would be a major indicator of reliability. In fact, it might even go under mass authentications, because we would be able to, according to Sayyid al-Khoi, over 160 narrators, Shaykh al-Tusi said regarding them, Usnida anhu. That means 160 are deemed reliable, if we accept this indicator of reliability. So, he has said this about some of the companions of Imam al-Sadiq, some of the companions of Imam al-Rida, some of the companions of Imam al-Baqir, some of the companions of Imam al-Kadhim, some of the companions of Imam al-Hadi. Here, there's a debate over what this means. أُسْنِدَ عَنْهُ. What does Shaykh Tusi mean by أُسْنِدَ عَنْهُ? One meaning is to read it like this: أَسْنَدَ عَنْهُ. So and so, أَسْنَدَ عَنْهُ. أَسْنَدَ عَنْهُ. The first meaning is that he heard from the Imam directly. وَأَسْنَدَ عَنْهُ. Meaning he narrated directly from the Imam. His isnad is directly from the Imam. This is one meaning. If this is the case, then this is not an indicator of reliability, because there were many that narrated directly from the Imam. So this is one possibility, and this does not help the indicator of reliability. Another possibility is that he narrated from the Imam, but not directly, indirectly. So there's an intermediary between him and the Imam. And here there's two opinions. One opinion says that intermediary were all reliable. They were thuqat. For example, this is the opinion of Al-Muhaqqiq al-Damad in his Rawashih al-Samawiyah. He says that when Shaykh al-Tusi says أُسْنِدَ عَنْهُ, that means that narrator narrated indirectly from the Imam. So there's a wasla, there's a middle person, but that middle person is reliable. That person is thiqa. This is one. The other opinion is that no, that person doesn't have to necessarily be thiqa. There's an intermediate, there's a middle person. When he says أُسْنِدَ عَنْهُ, that means there's a middle person between that transmitter and the Imam. But that person doesn't necessarily have to be thiqa, reliable. Sayyid al-Khwa'i rejects this view. He rejects this view. Why? Well, first of all, let's give a justification for this view. This view says أُسْنِدَ عَنْهُ means that you narrate with a middle person. While if you want to narrate directly, you would say rawa. Rawa means he narrated directly. Asnada means he narrated indirectly. And Shaykh Tusi in Ghiyath, in his section on Ghiyath ibn Ibrahim, he says Asnada anhu, meaning on Imam Sadiq, wa rawa an Abi al-Hasan, meaning Imam al-Kadhim. So Asnada an al-Sadiq wa rawa an al-Kadhim. He says, see the difference in expression? He didn't meet Imam Sadiq. He narrated with indirectly, so Asnada an al-Sadiq. But he met Imam al-Kadhim, farawa an al-Kadhim. Sayyid al-Khwa'i rejects this. He says, no, Asnada anhu does not mean narrating with a middleman. There's someone between you and Imam. No. Why? He says, because he says, if this person did not narrate directly from the Imam, why did Shaykh al-Tusi consider him part of the companions of the Imam? He has to put him in the last chapter of his book Rijal with those whom did not narrate from the Imams. Because Asnada anhu means he didn't narrate directly from the Imam. There was a middle person. So he should have put him in the last chapter. So this is one. Two, some of those individuals that Shaykh al-Tusi said Asnada anhu, al-Shaykh himself in his Fihrist and al-Najashi tell us that he rawa an al-Sadiq. He narrated directly. He narrated directly from Imam Sadiq. So Asnada anhu doesn't mean he narrated with a middle person, because Shaykh al-Tusi himself and al-Najashi, they tell us that this person narrated directly from Imam Sadiq. But this is not a problem, because just because Shaykh al-Tusi said Asnada anhu, meaning he narrated indirectly, it doesn't negate the fact that he narrated directly as well. The transmitter could easily the transmitter could easily narrate. So just because a person narrated directly from Imam al-Sadiq, it doesn't mean that he couldn't have narrated indirectly. So there's no negation. The third problem that Sayyid al-Khoi mentions is that Shaykh al-Tusi, regarding Jabir bin Yazid al-Ju'fi and others, he said, أسند عنه وروى عنه. So this means that this is the same meaning when he's saying أسند عنه وروى عنه. They mean the same. It can't mean two different things. Because if روى عنه means he narrated directly, then why would he say he narrated indirectly? He either narrated directly or he narrated indirectly. أسند عنه وروى عنه both mean the same. However, this is not a problem either. This, in fact, this ishkal could easily be refuted in that Shaykh al-Tusi is telling us that this narrator, he has two types of narrations that he narrated from the Imam. Sometimes he would narrate directly, and sometimes he would narrate indirectly. Sometimes he would hear the Imam directly, and sometimes he would hear from a middleman. So these are two, up till now we mentioned two possibilities to asnada anhu. One is that he would narrate directly from the Imam. The other narration is that he would narrate indirectly from the Imam. There's a middleman. And up till now, there's no usnida anhu or asnada anhu. Asnada anhu is not an indicator of reliability. It doesn't mean anything. The third possibility is that asnada anhu is talking about Ibn Uqdah. Ibn Uqdah narrates from this narrator. So when he says asnada anhu, meaning Ibn Uqdah asnada anhu, he has a link to this narrator. This is a third possibility that has been ascribed to Sayyid Hasan al-Sadr. This also has nothing to do with an indicator of reliability. A fourth possibility is that asnada anhu means he only narrates from this Imam. So for example, Zurara, he lists him in the companions of Imam al-Sadiq and he says asnada anhu, means that he only narrates from Imam al-Sadiq. But this is not correct, because many of these transmitters whom Shaykh al-Tusi said asnada anhu, he would narrate from Imam al-Sadiq and he would narrate from someone else. The fifth possibility, and this is the possibility that made it into an indicator of reliability, it should be read as usnida anhu, not asnada, usnida anhu, meaning that scholars, ulama, they relied on him when he narrated from Imam al-Sadiq. Usnida anhu, they relied on him. Usnida, meaning they relied on him when he narrated narrations from this Imam or that Imam. And this would mean that this person is reliable. And this is an opinion that was accepted by Sheikh Muhammad Taqi al-Majlisi, the father of Sheikh Muhammad Baqir al-Majlisi. There's another problem. There's a problem with this possibility, is that Sheikh al-Tusi, when he sometimes says usnida anhu, he later says da'if. Usnida anhu, da'ifun. How could these two go together? If usnida anhu means that scholars relied on him, how could he later say da'if? How could him being reliable and da'if go together? This is according to Al-Muhaqqiq al-Tustari. Sayyid al-Khoi says that sometimes he would say usnida anhu according to people who are unknown. So they're unknown. They don't even have narrations in the 4 books of Hadith. Thus, the opinion that we believe that usnida anhu means is that most likely it meant the second possibility, meaning that this individual narrates with a middleman from the Imam. Asnada anhu, he didn't he narrated with a middle person, with an intermediary. But is this an indicator of reliability? It doesn't seem like that it is. And with this, we conclude our indicators of reliability, and we conclude this course of introduction to Rijal studies, inshallah. Walhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wa sallallahu ala Muhammadin wa alihi at-tahirin.